EVO. Welcome back to The Devil Within. We have a special bonus episode for you today that I've been doing in support of the MGM Plus show, Let the Devil In, which is based on season 1 of my podcast, The Devil Within. I've been interviewing the people responsible for literally making the show. Not someone like me that did the podcast and developed the IP. The actual artists who came in, boots on the ground, and created the show from nothing. So today I'm very, very happy to have the director of the show, writer-director, Trey Nelson. Trey, great to see your face again, man.
Thanks.
How are you?
Yeah, good to see you too, man. It's we had a lot of fun times on set when we were shooting those recreations, and it's good to see your face again.
Thank you. So I have a very cool story about meeting Trey. So as I've mentioned before in this, it's been like I've been sleepwalking through this because I'm just so happy that everything has been going the way it's going, because it's been such a long journey for me to get there. So every day I was on set, I was just the guy in the corner with a big smile on my face, just happy to be there, you know? And so I met Trey the first day of shooting recreations, because we did this in 2 sections. First, we did the interview portions, which Trey wasn't involved with. And then when we got to the recreations, we're at this nice church in Jersey, super close to where I grew up. And I just walk in and you see the activity. It's like a beehive on a TV or a film set. Tons of people, all these trucks outside, equipment coming in. And I got a little imposter syndrome kind of started creeping over me. I'm like, oh my gosh, all of these people are here because of this podcast that I wrote, you know, in my apartment in Hollywood 10 years ago, you know? And so it got a little kind of overwhelming. And then, you know, I see Danny and I see Annika and I see everybody, and I want to meet people, and I see the actors that are playing these people that I've known my whole life. And then I meet Trey. And within 5 minutes of talking to you, Trey, we're sitting on this pew in the church. I don't know if you remember this. And it's like you were sharing stuff with me and I was sharing stuff with you, like deep, like childhood trauma stuff that we were both kind of facing because of the subject matter of the show. And it was, I didn't fight it. I'm usually not that much of a people person, you know, but it was just such an honest interplay there that I went with it. You remember what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, man. I won't forget it, because it was a bit of a confession for both of us, wasn't it? And we were in church.
Yes. Oh, dude. Yes.
And you know, I think the backstory of leading up to that moment was that, and what I shared with you was that I nearly quit. And the reason that I nearly quit was because I had, you know, I came on this project as a producer, and then some things happened, and I had to take over some roles. It was a hard project. You know, television these days, you know, they're giving you less and less to do more and more. And this was not unlike any of those other projects that are, you know, like that. And so what I didn't realize was that the nature of the story was going to intersect with my life in a way that I thought I had left it in the past years ago. And the truth is that it didn't, and that I was sort of confronted with a choice very early on working on this project, whether I was going to quit or whether I was going to move forward through quite frankly, the fear that I was gripped with.
Wow. So that it established a connection between us, like right away, where I really trusted what you were doing, and just kind of got to sit back and watch. You know, I learned a lot about myself on it, on the project, that I'm not precious about stuff. You know, that's not to say that I don't love, you know, what I'm creating, but I also understand that there are people who know a lot more of me, and to let people do their jobs. You know, and I stayed super hands off. And if people wanted to ask me something, great, I was there and I'd give an honest response. But for the most part, I let, you know, the craftsmen like you and like Annika and Danielle and Kat just do their job. So it wound up being a really, really great experience. But so tell me so you were first hired as a producer on this, and then you became they asked you to direct the recreations.
Yeah, and they asked me to come on, and I'd been working with the production company for that production company for 20 years, and I directed other recreation shows for them, and so they knew me, right? They knew that I could execute, and I think at that point they needed somebody they could trust, and that's that's the industry is like you want to work with people that you can trust. I mean, that's a word that you just used. It's like, you know, us sitting in. We weren't even facing each other to go back, like I think we were sitting side
Side
by
by
side
side,
in a pew,
side by side.
and
Yeah,
like I had met you for 15 minutes, and we just talked, and they had to pull us away from each
sure.
other,
They're like,
right?
yo, we're working here. Come on.
We got to do
Yeah.
some work here. But what was important, I think, just to bring it back to that moment was I think what I recognized very early on is this wasn't my story to tell. And like as a director, like you're honoring somebody else's story, and this was your story. And this was the
Mm.
people, of your town story. And the Sullivan story. There's so many people's stories in this, and you wanna honor those things. And I think part of my process as an artist and as a director is is to make sure that I connect with the people who are most connected to it.
Mm.
um, that helps me kind of like, create an environment in which there's curiosity and exploration. And I think that's really it makes the work fun. And if the work's fun, even when the subject matter isn't, then you're getting good stuff.
You kind of answered this, but I'm maybe go into it a little bit more. So the question that I have is, as a director, so there's the narrative part of it, there's the storytelling, then there's the tone, and this was decidedly dark kind of subject matter. Um, so the balance, you need a balance between respecting the victims, right, and also creating a compelling piece of content that fans of this genre are going to want to watch. And so when I say fans of the genre, they're expecting certain boxes to be checked in terms of being scary or being gory or being um, terrifying, or ghost story elements, or whatever. So how did you kind of strike that balance?
Well, I think
Respecting the victims and scaring the
right.
shit out of them. Yeah.
There's another element. So like you've got the true crime element
Mhm.
of it all, which you know, I I I think is a really, I think it's everywhere in television right now. It's everywhere in podcasts right now. And I think you have to tread through that space carefully, in my opinion, because this is what you have to have. You have to have clear comprehension of what you're doing. Okay. Are
Mm.
you making a horror film or are you making a true crime film? And I think what we tried to do was provide the true crime suspense elements of it while still honoring the jump scares and tonal qualities of horror. So, there's certain style elements that where the like the Venn diagram of those two things and there's overlap, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We tried to find overlap in those things. I think the other thing that is really fun about making something like this is the period quality of it, the 1980s time period, which is a
Yeah.
super hard thing to do on the budgets that you're working with in television. And I think a lot of the effort that we put into it and a lot of the effort that helped kind of like set the stage for performance and all those things was trying to find the right locations that felt like 1980s and do the best we can with that. So, and then there's wardrobe elements, there's all these other things that help set the tone of it. But I do think we really tried to sort of like fit that Venn diagram of horror and true crime and kind of like sit right in the middle of it. Um, I think one element that's always fun to play with that we weren't able to play with was like the body horror element of it. I would have really liked to do a little bit more of that, but you also have to respect the true crime nature of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a great job of it. But so you're a small town kid, grew up in New England, right?
Actually, no, I didn't. I grew up in Dallas, but I live in a small town in New England right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I grew up in a big town.
In the
I
city.
grew up in
Yeah.
Dallas, in the city,
Dallas. All right.
yeah, and and then moved, and then I've been living in Massachusetts for the past 10 years. But I live in a town of 3,000 people. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's 3 murders here. So, I mean, uh, I don't know. I don't know if I like those percentages.
No, I don't like them either. But because, Jefferson Township is a super small town, right? And you were able to
Yeah.
really lean into that small town feel. And you mentioned it in an answer earlier that it's not only like my story or the Sullivan story. It's the story of a small town and how it was affected basically top to bottom. And so did you incorporate that? Was that like where was that in your thinking as you were prepping that?
I think, the small town element of it wasn't so much in terms of the scale and scope of what I was shooting, a big part of it, but I do understand the small town sort of narrative elements of it, in which something that happens in a small town. So I'll give you an example. There's a pretty, I'm not going to mention the town that I live in, but there's a pretty well-known murder that happened in the past 20 years up here, in which a man fell out of a window. Okay, or no, a wife fell out of a window, and everybody thought that the husband did it. But the sort of the gossip and everything that happened within the context of that particular accident slash murder, um, there were so many stories that were surrounding it. And I think that when there's something that we can't explain with forensics, or the things that we can't explain away with science, or any of those things, when something's unexplainable like that, you reach and grasp for things that are familiar. And that may be a belief system, right? Um, that may be a personal preference, and say, oh, you can't explain everything, so let's explain it on the things that we've been taught. Um, so I don't know if I answered that question for you, but
You did.
I and the small town nature of when there is a crime. I think the person that really, and you interviewed Danny on this, and I think she's the best person to answer these questions, is because she had the interaction with the people in the town, was the respect that she gave to those people that agreed to be.
Yes. Because it was an uphill battle with a lot of them because of a lot of the liberties that I took in the podcast. I kind of blended true crime with horror,
Yeah.
and I knew what I was doing. My audience knew what I was doing. They know that I'm not a journalist. I don't have those ethical standards of storytelling. I'm, whatever. Um, and between Danny and Aniki, it was a long, slow, soft sell to get some of these people to come on. 7 or 8 phone calls, them check our resumes, check the resume of the production company, look at some of our other stuff, like, we're going to respect your story, you're safe with us, all that, and it worked. We got just about everybody we wanted to get. So I was really proud of how they handled that. So one of the first things, not one of the first things, but one of the things in that first conversation I had with you, that's what I was trying to say, that you shared with me, is that you're a practicing Buddhist.
Yeah.
And so I happen to be atheist. And so to have a Buddhist and an atheist sitting in a Catholic church talking about the mysteries of childhood trauma, I keep going back to that. But how does your practice of Buddhism affect your work in something like this?
You used the right way. You actually are one of the few people that I know that have used what I call the proper way of someone who identifies as being Buddhist, which is, you're practicing Buddhist. I'm practicing at it. I don't really know. Uh, I have a humble. I exist humbly in this world, and know that everything is always changing around me. Um, and I think something that, to go back to what when we're sitting there, I didn't know it was like a start of a bad joke, that an atheist and a Buddhist sit at, but 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 the truth is that, you and I are sitting there, and I'll share with you what my childhood trauma was. It was that, I was 13 years old, same age as Tommy. almost the same year. So like I was born in 76. This
Mhm.
happened in 88, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so like I was maybe 12 when this happened, but I was 12 when the Sullivan murders happened, and then 13 when this happened to me, which was I was away at camp and sleepaway camp. And while I was at home, my parents had a home invasion.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and it was super scary for my parents. Obviously, they were fine. They were injured and they were robbed and all that. But when I came back, my entire house was packed. Like all my clothes, everything was packed, and they were moving out. So the trauma of like, oh, I'm coming home from camp. Why are we moving? This is what happened, and we moved. But what the effect that even though in Eli and I were talking a little bit about this when we were shooting, and because he's obsessed with home invasions for one reason or another. And he was like really interested in the story, and he kind of nailed the psychology of it for me, which was like I never after that I never felt safe as a child in my own house. And what I had done, and it sort of had rooted in my brain, this sort of like natural filmmaking storytelling in me, which was I wasn't there when it happened, but I built the whole thing up in my head of what had happened to my parents. And I had didn't really know. I thought I had put it away. I'd left Dallas and moved all over the place. And I turn 50 next year, so it's like I thought I had packed all this stuff away. And what I didn't realize was that I had actually been like unconsciously carrying around this weight my entire life of fear.
Mm.
And when the Sullivan story came to me and I was tasked with recreating the death of somebody, I was like, God, I don't know if I want to do that, right?
Yeah.
And because it didn't align with my values, quite
Mm.
frankly. And um a week went by and I was having nightmares and everything from my childhood was creeping up, and I was like I couldn't sleep at night, and I was like inches away from quitting.
Wow.
And then I went to therapy, which is always helpful. And
Always.
I
Yeah.
and I spoke to my therapist, and we worked through it, and I was able to sort of without getting into the psychology of it all, but sort of I was able to sort of talk to my 13-year-old self and tell him that everything was going to be okay. And then like the spiritual aspect that came into it for me, and I was able to move through that fear, and I was able to get close to the fear, and I was able to sort of like incorporate it into my spiritual practice, which is like to acknowledge that emotions are emotions and that they're not there forever. And that if you can move through the fear, you can see and comprehend things clearly. And in the clear comprehension of after being afraid, I was like, okay, what is the point? Why am I doing this? Why am I on this project? Because I needed to know why I was on this project. And uh, the answer, the answers were, I needed to move my through my fear, and I needed to acknowledge what it meant to have power.
Mm.
And I think those are themes and subject matters in this story that are either conscious or subconscious. And I deeply believe that like Tommy is someone that was obsessed with power. And you can see that in the stories. And then what came out of the whole thing was a subject of fear. And for me personally, I was able to sort of like deal with those two things, both as an artist and also through my artwork.
Do you think Tommy was obsessed with power because he'd lived his whole life without any of it? 'Cause everyone else was making
Absolutely.
decisions? Yeah. He wanted a taste of
Absolutely.
it on his
Absolutely.
own.
Yeah.
Um, so something I talked about with Danny that I had a moment when we were on that house in Maplewood up on the hill with the basement where we were shooting for a couple of days.
Mm.
Um, that because of either the lack of transparency or the police files actually were lost, right? We really don't have an accurate record, either, especially a visual record of what happened in that basement. Okay, we have the testimony of police, we have testimony of some of the Kennedy kids that were there. But beyond that, I had a moment where I was standing there and I'm like, we're kind of creating an official record here that didn't exist until now, because everyone was very careful about the placement of the body, about where Tommy was, about where the weights wound up, through testimony from people that were there. And so that's the clearest record that exists right now, is what you guys created there. Did you get that sense when you were shooting?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I know that there was a lot of policing of accuracy when we were on set
Yeah.
that day, you know, and that's why it took all day to shoot that, you know. I mean, for for the budget that we were on, to spend that much time trying to get it accurately, um, it's a testament to, you know, the production company's willingness to allow us to do that, but also to, you know, Danny's um, passion for wanting to get it right.
Very important. And I think if that passion to get it right hadn't been there, then I would have probably spoken up, you know, and fought for it. But it was there in spades. So my most recent episode that dropped yesterday was an interview with the lead actor, Christopher Bryan. And
Yeah.
he had a lot of nice things to say about you, specifically your approach to directing him, which was, he said he was quiet about it. He said, and the most, like, the most powerful direction that he got, he said that'll stay with me for a really long time, is, he said, Trey came up to me once and he said, if you're not scaring yourself, you're not going to scare anybody else. Okay.
Yeah.
And that made him go, okay, I got to turn it up a notch. I got to really get there. I got to dig in. I got to push myself to the point where I'm scared in the performance that I'm giving. And he said it made him really, really step up. So does your approach to directing change? And do you cater it to what you feel or discern or divine what the actor needs? Or is your technique consistent, and you hope that the actor will listen to the way you communicate?
Yeah, I think I remember that moment really distinctly, because, you know, Chris came up to me and was like, "That really helped, thank you." And I'm like, "Sure, that's what I'm here for." um,
Right.
you know, I think there's a myth. You know, there's a myth to the role of a director. You know, that's been, uh, you know, it's a myth of power,
Hmm.
and it's interesting that we're talking about power. Um, you know, I think, you know, you talk about the Spielbergs of the world, enormous amount of creative power. Um, but if you go back to Jaws, that's a guy who all he wanted to do was go home. He even says it. I was on the boat and all I want to do is go home, because he had no control, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And he had very limited control. He was on the ocean, he was on a boat, he had a shark that didn't work. And I think what's really important in sort of debunking the myth of directors is that we actually have very little control over when you're actually filming. There's an enormous amount of trust, but there's very little kind of like control. And I'll explain it this way. In the pre-production process, you have all the control in the world. You can build the world, you could choose all of the colors for art, you could choose wardrobe, you could choose the actors. You have the enormous amount of control. My process is this: I try to imbue knowledge, trust, and my own personal preferences to the actors prior to getting on set, so that we have conversations about themes, intentions, and tone. Because I think those things are probably the one thing that everybody messes up, is tone. Like, if you're a director and you tone wrong, the whole film kind of like falls apart. The whole story falls apart. So knowing your tonality is really important. When I'm on set, I let go, and not in the sense of like I know what I need to do in a day, but in my relationship to an actor, I want them to know that I trust them.
Mm.
And because trust, I think when an actor is contracting around creativity, you get bad performances. But when you have an actor that feels free and is playing, then that, I mean, you're an actor, right? Like
Yep.
you came up as an actor in Hollywood. When an actor feels free and is allowed to sort of like explore and do the things that they want within the domain of what we're playing in, of the sandbox, then I think you get better performances. But to go back to that moment, which is when we were recreating the moment when Tommy attacked his mom.
Mm.
There were like a couple of takes, and I was just like, "This isn't like I don't believe any of this." And instead of saying to him, "I don't believe anything that you're doing," which would deflate an actor and erode right, like erode the
Yeah.
confidence and trust that I built with this individual. I said something different, which was, "If you're not scared, we're not scared."
Yeah.
And that is a question that evokes within the actor's mind, "Oh, well, what the hell does that mean? Oh, that means I have to scare myself, um, and I have to believe what I'm doing."
Mm.
And I think that's what happened. He believed. This is the other thing that I don't. Maybe you guys haven't talked about is we're working with non-union actors who have
Yeah.
very very experience. Like we're talking people who have very little experience acting. So like you're teaching and directing at the same time. So it's teaching how to act in some ways, but teaching how to find the truth of the moment for your actors.
Tell me about the casting process, because again, I was talking to Christopher, and you mentioned that I'm an actor. Uh, I haven't been actively acting since I started writing a bit more about 7, 8 years ago, and so because of that, I've completely missed the entire self-tape phenomenon. I've never self-taped. Every audition I've ever been on was in person in a casting office with either casting director, producers, and directors. Like that was it. And so I still don't think that way. So I'm talking to Christopher about it. He goes, "Well, the first audition came in and it was for Tommy and for Bart McConley. And so I cranked him out real quick as I was on my way to the whatever." I went, "Oh, wait, what? It was a self?" He goes, "Yeah, self-tape." I said, "What about the callback?" He goes, "It was on Zoom." Like, so you
Yeah.
were cast before anyone even met you in person? He goes, "Yeah, yeah." So
Yeah,
that
that's how that's how it happens
it
nowadays.
freaked me out. Freaked me out. All
Yeah.
right. So tell me about that, please.
Yeah. So the self tapes come in, and then you use that as an opportunity to edit down either look or performance, right? And then the sometimes you're given not only one sort of like personal interaction over Zoom, but you'll get two depending on the budget of the project. But in that second, especially when you're working with people who have not had a lot of experience acting, in that second sort of like Zoom casting session, you really want to assess whether they're experienced or not. Quite frankly, how how do they process notes, right?
Oh,
And that it's the most important thing. Like, are they processing my notes like be just to please me? Are they processing my notes to please them? Like, why are you here? So you have to, as a director and as someone who's casting, you really have to assess what is this individual's ability to listen,
right.
and then to take those notes. It's anything. It's take those notes and then do something else. And sometimes who's you'll spend half an hour with an actor making sure that you're making the right decisions. But I think Chris popped for me from the very beginning. I was like, this kid's
Yeah.
good, uh, and he was fantastic. He was. There's a scene. Um, I think it's going to be coming up in some episodes where we had to ask the young man to give us a variation of performances because we don't know what happened to Tommy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And he's sitting out by this, shed, and I had to ask Chris to give me within, and we didn't have a lot of time, duh, like when do you ever have time? But like
Yeah.
I had to like really ask him to give me a variety of performances, like 6 or 7 different emotional performances that ranged, and that was the stress test for each of the actors because I knew I had to do that on the day, and I needed somebody who could pull that off. There was only one person that could do that, and that was Chris. It was that there's nobody else could do that. I don't know actors, quite frankly, that I've worked with, you know, like I've worked with like Josh Duhamel. I made a
Mm,
feature film with Josh, and like I don't know many actors that would be able to do what Chris did. Full stop. I worked with Josh Wiggins, who's an extraordinarily young actor, has made movies with Duhamel, Stallone, like all this stuff. Do I think Wiggins could do something like that? Maybe. He's a spectacular actor, but
yeah.
like Chris, I mean, incredible, incredible work. And those performances are going to be coming up in the next episodes.
I will carry the torch for Chris and double down on that. And I think you can ascribe all of that talent to his theater training. There's nothing like being on
Totally.
stage. I'm a theater actor. I've done hundreds of plays. That's where I feel at home, and it's great because, and one of the things about live theater is, performance can change night to night depending on like the audience. One night you could suddenly find yourself in a comedy that you didn't know because there's one guy in the audience that laughs and it becomes infectious and everyone's laughing at stuff. And you're like, okay, I guess we're playing for laughs tonight when it's like this serious drama. So you never really know what you're going to get. So you got to be able to think on your feet, and Chris is he's an extensively trained theater actor, relatively new to acting for the camera, but he's been working consistently since. We had to reschedule our interview a few times because he was on, oh, I'm doing this, indie feature, or I'm doing this episodic, or I'm doing whatever. So he's doing really well. He's doing really well. He's
Yeah,
got
I
a
think
great.
I have no doubt that I have no doubt that he's going to have a great career. I have no doubt.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely does.
I just want
So
people to know that I want people to know that I found him. Okay.
you'll get credit for discovering Christopher Bryant. How was your experience? Because Chris had some interesting insights that I really kind of connected with him on. Because he'd never worked on anything where there was a studio or a network involved, where he would get notes from above from people who weren't on set. Did you have any issues or any problems or any positive stories? Because my experience with MGM Plus and with Left Right was all very, very positive. I'm just wondering if you felt under the gun or you want, like stingy or whatever. No,
Never.
good.
I mean, you never have enough time or money.
The budget is small. Yes, yes.
It's like, I mean, that's just it. So I hate asking for more from the people, the technicians and artists that I work with, but that's the name of the game. That's the domain that we step into.
Yeah,
We just make sure that we do it safely and with respect. That's the most important thing. Um,
yeah,
but no, like, we're talking about companies. Left Right's been around for 20 years. It's more than 20
yeah.
years. And MGM obviously is an old studio, but
I guess.
Amazon, uh, yeah. So no, I didn't have any problems. They're great.
Great. How'd you get your start? So let's back up a little bit. Like, what? Like, tell me when, because we're about the same age. I'm a couple of years older than you, but when, um, over 20 years you've been doing this. Like, what sparked it in you? Is this something you always wanted to do? Were you like Eli running around down in Dallas with a high
No,
eight?
I
No. Yeah.
no, that's not my story. It's funny,
Okay.
like I bumped into Eli after we were done shooting, and this was a hard shoot, man. Like you were there. Like
Yeah.
this was a really shoot. Like how many we had to
Oh,
shoot. I mean, in reality, we're probably shooting 10 pages a day, which is
yeah.
like
Late winter Jersey. It's no picnic. It was
it's
cold. It was
yeah, it was rough.
long day. Yeah.
Um, but like after last day of shooting, I bumped into Eli. He told me that he had this like that he had this favorite kind of like, bakery that was like around the corner from the hotel that we were both staying. And I was like, I might check it out. Like he said it was good. So I bump it and he's there and we're talking and he just kind of told me his story about, coming up and working on, I worked on Quiz Show as a PA. Like, I mean, we're talking about a guy who was like surrounded by, some of the greatest people. I mean, he worked on God, what is it? The Shock Jock movie. Why am I blanking on it? Oh,
Yeah, the
Howard
Howard
Stern.
Stern,
Yeah, the
Private
Howard.
Course.
Yeah, he worked on that. He was like Howard's like right hand man for a while. So he had a lot of exposure to like a lot of really
Big
enormous,
films.
big talent.
Yeah.
And then moved to LA because he knew that that's where he would be able to get his movies made. Mine's totally different. Like I grew up in Dallas. I ended up going to school in upstate New York. Um, my story is that, I got a job working for Gap Incorporated out in San Francisco in 1998, and got a lot of exposure, traveled around the world, worked for designers, marketers, producers, like all that stuff in distribution. Was very, very unhappy doing that. And I had two parents that were artists, but they wanted me to be a businessman because being an artist is an unreliable reason. You can't rely on a pay. But I grew up in an environment where I had two artists as parents, and I started taking screenwriting courses at San Francisco State while I was working at Gap, and I quit. I just quit, and I was like, I've got to figure out what it is I want to do. I want to spend the rest of my life in a cubicle, which is the Gen X nightmare, of course,
Yeah.
working in cubicle. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
it is.
and I quit, and I traveled a little bit. Um, I won't go into the details of what happened when I was traveling, but I ended up moving back to New York and New York City in May of 2001. And then September
Whoa.
11th happened. On set, working as a production assistant on a process trailer shoot on Houston and West Broadway when the towers were hit, which is, this isn't 2 day, right? The 26th anniversary or 24th anniversary is coming up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that that obviously changed a lot for me. New York was dead for about a year after the September 11th attacks, and then I just kind of like slowly worked my way up in the industry from production assistant, to reality television was really big at that time. I started getting work as a field producer, and then worked myself up as a director, and then I started making short films. I made a short film called Option the Rights to a Short Story. Made a short film called Raccoon, which ended up going. It did really well on the festival circuit. Went to Aspen Shorts Fest, which is like one of the better short film festivals in the world. And just started working my way up, and then started directing a ton of television. And then in 2014, I made a feature film which I wrote called Lost in the Sun with Josh Duhamel and Josh Wiggins. And that came out at the end of 2015. And then since then, I've done so many other things. I've made I've made 9 feature-length documentaries. I work mostly as a commercial director and a documentarian. In around 2019, 2020, I kind of got out of television. This is funny, Brandon. This is the funny thing. I haven't worked on a television show in 6 years since they called me to work
Whoa.
on this.
Wow.
And I got
Wow.
called to work on, and it was like I, it was a transformative. I told you all the reasons why this was a transformative
Oh yeah.
experience for me, but like I was just like, I sort of stepped away from television, focused on feature films, documentaries, and commercials. Um, but you've got to look at these things in your life and why they come around. And, you have to meet moments in your life. And this to me was a moment that I tried to meet in my life. And I really think that the intersection of art and, life is a really important thing when you're making something. So yeah,
It
that's my
is.
story.
So to talk about that a little bit more, because off camera before we started, we were pre-gaming a little bit. You mentioned that intersection of art and life, like, and I wanted to hear the rest of your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think, um, so yeah, so I think what happened um, on this project for me was, I was confronted with a choice in which I, in which my past of, the home invasion, the trauma of that when I was 13 years old intersected with violence at home for the Sullivan family.
Mm,
And that sort of like intersection between my personal life and and this true life story, I was I had a choice to make, right? Like I hadn't worked in television in a long time by choice, quite frankly, not because I didn't want to. Um, I didn't like the way television was going. I didn't like the way that it was treating people. Um, so I had a choice to make of whether to stop working on this show or sort of face my fear. And I think when you face fears in your life, um, you're given opportunities to grow. And I think that I think there's something about like when we loosen the grip of the stories that we have told ourselves our entire lives. For instance, my story that, okay, right? Like I've I have, like when you let go of that story you've been telling yourself, okay, well, I grew up in a shitty neighborhood in Dallas. I didn't live in a safe place. I will always be unsafe. I will always live in fear. I will always have those things. When you are confronted with the choice of letting go of that story, you offer yourself the opportunity to be free
yep.
when you
And
know these stories that you've been telling
it's
yourself your
that
entire
I tell my wife and my kid this like all the time. The treasures in the cave you're afraid to go into. You know,
100%.
tell yourself a different story. Tell yourself a different fucking story and go make it happen. And sometimes the last person to take that advice is me, the person that gives it all the time. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But because of these narratives that we have just woven as fact in our lives forever, and they're not. We could tell ourselves a new story at any time.
Yeah, and to acknowledge that that story doesn't have power over me is
Yeah,
really important. To say like, "Hey,
really.
this story doesn't have power over me." Did this Brandon, this is the crazy thing, man. I'm not a horror guy, right? Like I don't do horror films. Like that is not the genre that I work in. So this is why this was so uncomfortable for me. Like I had,
Mm,
it was an uncomfortable thing for me because of the element of fear. I am
mm.
currently now prepping for a horror film because of this experience.
Come on. Oh, that's great.
I'm because I'm like, you know what I need to do is I need to lean into this fear because what
Mm,
better to have a storyteller or director who understands fear and what it means so that they could create something that offers other people to lean into that fear, right? So like I have now acknowledged that like I have more work to do in this space, and what better to
mhm.
do that work than to go out and make another feature film. And that's what I'm working on. And
I think that's great. I think that's
26,
great.
we're
And
planning to shoot it in Toronto in early 2026. Um, so that's all because of this project.
I think that's great. And it's you follow a path and you're not sure where it's going to come out of the woods, but it's often in an unexpected place. And here you are,
Yeah.
prep for a horror film. That's crazy. So I want to wrap this up by asking, um, what do you hope that that viewers would take away from this? I mean, not just about the Tommy Sullivan case, but how it was presented in this format, right? How it was, we give a couple of different, I'm going to have one final question after this, but what do you hope that viewers take away from it? Uh, People who weren't alive in the 80s, because that's a big part of the audience, right? Who weren't aware of the Satanic Bank, didn't live through it like we did. Like, is there a smaller, more intimate kind of takeaway that you hope, or are you still painting with like a larger brush thematically? What you hope people take away from it?
I actually was thinking about because you sent me this question earlier, and I wanted to
Yeah.
put some thought time into it, and I think it does go back to um, for me. Okay, this is my personal perspective on it. I think that we often cling to our beliefs in ways that may not be helpful in revealing truths. And I think that if we're going to get to the truth of anything, we've got to open ourselves up to alternate ways of thinking about things. That could be, I'll give you an example. That could be someone who says 100% that Tommy was schizophrenic and had a schizophrenic break. Undiagnosed schizophrenic has schizophrenic break. Two, um, the devout Christian who believes that this was something else. Okay, um, but I do think we were talking about stories that we tell ourselves and that we hang
Mm.
on to those stories. And I think that what is helpful about a project like this and a story like this is that by having it from different perspectives, it allows us to let go of the stories that we've been holding on to. And in letting go of those stories that we've been holding on to, like, back in the day, we used to sit around fires and tell ghost stories. The fire is now the television set and it glows, right? And we sit around in different places around the world watching this same thing. But the effect of sitting around the campfire and essentially telling stories is the same, is that it offers us opportunities to see things in different ways and from different perspectives. And truth is a personal thing, right? So someone might come away from watching these 4 episodes and say, this is definitely the reason why it happened, or this is definitely the reason why it happened. But I think what's important is to leave yourself open to any and all interpretations of what the truth could be.
All right. So my last question, because when we were pitching this around, I was always asked this question, to the point where the producer said, maybe change your answer. Because people always wanted to know, what do you think, Branden? Like, what do you think happened? You make some pretty bold claims in your podcast. Like, do you really think it was demonic possession? Right. My answer was always the same. It was like, I said, no, I don't think that. 'Cause I think the truth of what happened is much scarier coming from as a parent. Right. I think it's obvious that Tommy had was a teen in crisis, and everybody who was supposed to give a shit missed it, from parents to coaches to clergy to teachers. Everybody instead saw Tommy through a very specific lens, as an athlete, as altar boy, as a straight A student, whatever. And as long as he was delivering on those expectations, they didn't look any deeper. Okay. And now, as my kids are older, they're both right around Tommy's age, and I'm in the really tough spot as a parent, where I'm becoming less and less of a factor in their lives. I'm more of like a consultant now, right? I'm the guy at home that like makes dinner and helps with the homework, and make friends that they do for advice. They have other friends' parents, they have coaches, they have teachers, so it's my influence on them. And that's the way it goes. It's not unique to me as a parent. That's the natural flow of life as kids get older. The parental influence wanes, and you're left to hope, like, I hope I did a good enough job as that they were kids, right? So that aspect of the case with Tommy is that the people who were supposed to care and help him missed it for their own somewhat selfish reasons. Okay. So I would ask you, what do you think happened?
No, I agree with you 100%. I
Okay.
think it's yeah, I agree with you.
All right.
I think there's I think there also could have been there this was something that really interesting that happened while I was scouting.
Mm.
Um, one of the houses I was scouting was owned by a clinical psychiatrist, and I was telling him the story of this whole thing,
Mhm.
and he goes, "Oh yeah, we see stuff like this all the time with people with schizophrenia. Like, people who are schizophrenic often have schizophrenic breaks, and it has to do with sort of the duality of religion, right? The dual
Mm.
nature
Oh,
of,
wow. Yeah.
and you see a lot of these people, and I was just like, I called Danny, I go, Danny, we have to make sure, like, I just had this conversation with a clinical psychologist. I think there's something that you really need to explore with this, just in service of one aspect of it so that it's not just all, the devil made him do it. So my belief is that kids during this time, I have teenagers. Okay, I have a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old, and kids during this time period, there are so many things that are going on under the hood from you know from hormones to social emotional stuff to all this stuff. And kids can feel very alone and isolated if they are not seen, felt, and heard by parents and other people. If they're objectified by their parents, like you were just saying, which is like everybody, it sounds like everybody's objectifying this young man, and that he was a good student, and that he did all the right things, and that he was perfect, right?
Hmm.
That's an enormous burden on any individual, right? To
Yeah.
hold that expectation, especially if you're dealing with maybe some mental health issues on top of that. And
And then
anybody
you,
can break.
sorry to interrupt you, but then you factor in the power of the religious dogma that he was just marinating in for his entire life, and
Yeah.
where there's an opportunity for that to enter in and fill in these slots, in the somewhat, obviously here, a dangerous way, because he chose to align himself with the darker aspects of Catholicism. I mean, it's like a tinderbox, man, just ready to blow.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
It's
that's
just
what happened.
it's so sad, I think that's the thing about all of it is the tragedy of it all, and the
Right.
effect it's had on people's lives for so long.
Yep.
Um, I know this. I tried to really hold the entire Sullivan family in compassion, including Tommy, during this process, because I know, from personal experience, um, if you could hold people in love, even if they're have done horrible things, you're creating a little bit more space for love and compassion
I
in
agree.
yourself.
I agree. Yep, I agree. And the reason that this story stayed with me for so long was because I was desperate to find an excuse that didn't paint Tommy as this monster. It's just hard for me that a contemporary of mine could have found it in himself to do what he did, and I still struggle with that. But you know, it's what we do, man. It's what we do as artists, right? We tell stories.
Yeah, we use art to understand. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Well, Trey Nelson, let people know where they can find you or your work, if you want to plug your socials or
Sure.
film coming up sites.
Yeah,
Let
I
me
mean,
know.
I guess the only plug, you could go to my website, treynelson.com. I have a Substack, also, called Wavelength, in which I write about the intersection of. I've been recently writing about horror films and the intersection of horror with, uh, positive psychology, which is a niche audience, but
Yeah.
um, I think there's opportunities there for growth. I often coach people. I'm a trained coach, and when people hear that, it's like, well, what the heck does that mean? I use my coaching and directing, use my coaching and mentoring, use my coaching and all of it in knowing that, when I'm working with anybody, be it an artist or be it with somebody who's trying to make changes in their life, that I don't have all the answers, and that, that's a really important aspect of my process of moving through, both like as an artist and a director and a writer, but also as someone who's just trying to like add a little bit more goodness out into the world.
Wow. All right. So Trey Nelson, TreyNelson.com, and the Substack is Wavelength. Listeners, go check his stuff out. You won't be disappointed. Trey, so lucky that you wound up on this project, and it was a crooked road to get you there. A lot of stuff happened to make the door open for you, and I think the project is better for it. So thank you for
Thank you,
stopping
sir.
by with us today. Yeah, I appreciate it. Devil Within listeners, if you like the episode, please share it with your friends and family. Go over to Apple Podcast or Spotify, rate and review the show. Every little bit helps. And please tune in to MGM Plus Sunday nights for Let the Devil In, directed by the great Trey Nelson. Trey, I look forward to seeing you again soon, my friend.
See ya. Thanks.
The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your host, Branden Morgan.